Talk about timing. The French president's three-day state visit to Israel may have been planned long in advance, but François Hollande happens to be there 48 hours before the resumption of crucial talks over Iran's nuclear program. It was Paris last week that balked at a deal in Geneva, hence the enthusiastic red carpet treatment from his hosts. We'll ask our panel whether come Wednesday, Paris will still be towing a tough line, and also take a look into what's always a fine balancing act for a leader whose nation is home to both Europe's largest Jewish and Arab population.
عاشت الصداقة بين فرنسا وفلسطين.
תמיד אשאר חבר של ישראל. Je suis votre ami et je le serai toujours. Merci.
Today in the France 24 debate is Hollande's Israel's new best friend. And with us to talk about it from Jerusalem, an award-winning journalist turned politician for the Labour Party, former member of the Knesset, Daniel Ben-Simon. Welcome to the show. From the France-Israel Association, Charles Meyer is with us. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Okay.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Samuel Gilles-Mellac of the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, is also with us. Lund University's Rouzbeh Parsi joins us from the Swedish city of the same name. Nice to see you, sir. And France 24's Annette Young. Annette, remind me, didn't you once work somewhere in the Middle East?
Hang on, yes, I did. I think it was called Jerusalem. And I was there, I think, 7 years?
7 years, okay. And it's all fresh in your mind, as we'll soon find out. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Now, Annette, before we talk about Iran, let's have a look at François Hollande's day. He goes to Ramallah. He makes a speech before the Palestinian parliament. He goes to the Knesset. As we speak, he's going to have a state dinner. Is this just the usual? This is the usual standard fare?
It is. I mean, any of those presidential trips to that part of the world, and any part of the world, you jam-pack a lot into a very sort of small time frame as such. And the beauty of the Middle East is that Ramallah, and people don't actually realise this, is only a half an hour drive up the road from Jerusalem. So it's very easy to go in and out, especially when you're part of a presidential entourage and not having to clear checkpoints, obviously. So, and you know, what we saw there is that classic thing of him tailoring his speeches for the various audiences. We saw him obviously displaying his knowledge of Arabic for the Palestinians, and we saw him equally in the Knesset displaying his limited knowledge of Hebrew. And of course what was said to both audiences are very different. I mean, we had much greater emphasis while he was talking to the Palestinians about Israel, as far as the French are concerned, needing to halt building of those settlements in the West Bank. Again, we had reference to it in the speech in the Israeli Knesset, but sort of also very much cushioned among many other sort of positive remarks about Israel. The fact that he called it the startup nation, you know, the world champion of startups, but at the same time, you yourself are a startup. It was a very much, you know, I'm a good mate of yours. I'm just going to tell you a few uncomfortable things that you might not want to hear, but on the other hand, I'm also going to ensure that you're going to hear a lot of stuff that you do want to hear. And as expected, he did a good job.
And on that score, I believe François Hollande would take exception to what you just said. When he spoke before the Knesset, here's what he had to say about what he said in Ramallah, especially on the settlement building, and what he said in Jerusalem.
I haven't got two speeches, one for here and one for the Palestinian territories. I've talked in both places about the effort that needs to be made and the realistic approach needed to find a solution.
Daniel Ben-Simon, you heard Annette Young there say how he sort of cushioned it differently, even though the message was the same when it came to settlement building, that there should be a halt. Do Israelis honestly care if the French president tells them to stop building settlements?
You know, they do care who likes them and who doesn't like them. They do care who loves them and who doesn't love them. And if you love Israelis, you can say anything you want, even to stop settlements, and they will applaud you. Exactly what happened tonight. François Hollande had a masterful speech. He gave so many compliments to Israel, to the Jewish people, to its history. and he did the right thing for 25 minutes. And then he came, of course, after he spoke about Iran, and he said, we will always be with you on the Iranian issue. Then he came to the Palestinian issue, but he did it after cushioning the Israelis for 25 minutes. He said all the right things, and then he said, you know, you have to divide the land. You have to divide the capital, Jerusalem, for both people, and of course, to get rid of the settlements. But after the Israelis were intoxicated so much by the nice words of François Hollande, they were ready to accept even what he said about the settlements. And then he finished in Hebrew. So I would say, knowing the Israeli soul, you have, before saying, you know, something like bad things, you know, you have to be nice, to like them, to love them, and that's exactly what he did. That's why for Israelis and for him, it's a special relationship, a special reception. I don't remember since George Bush, President Bush, such a warm, extremely warm reception. But thanks, of course, to his way with Iran.
But it sort of takes the sting off of telling his hosts to stop building settlements. It means they effectively will ignore it.
You know, of course they will ignore. We know, you know, I know, and everybody knows that what he said is worth nothing in terms in practical terms. Of course, the Israeli workers will not stop building. Nothing has been stopped. Nothing has stopped since 1967. So whatever says President Reagan or Clinton or Obama or Bush, the work is being carried on for so many years. So, but the French position is no different from the American position, from the European position, from the Arab position. Something has to be done, and this decision has to be taken rather by Israelis themselves to answer this question. Should we carry on with the settlements, or maybe should we stop? And this is a major issue with our talks with the Palestinians.
Samuel, in his speech, François Hollande said France is a card to play when it comes to bringing all sides together. Did you feel as though he got that across, and was he convincing? Does France really have a card to play?
What is interesting is Daniel Ben-Simon just said you have to be nice to the Israelis so that they will be ready to hear some criticism. And that was the card that was played in a similar way by Nicolas Sarkozy a few years ago. When he was in Jerusalem in 2008, Nicolas Sarkozy was seen as a very pro-Israel president. And he believed that by being nice to the Israeli, by obtaining their confidence, he would be able to play a role in the political process. And we have seen that at the end of his mandate, Nicolas Sarkozy was calling Netanyahu with Obama, even if they were not confirming this, they were calling Netanyahu a liar. So the question is, will this give more influence to the French diplomacy in the Middle East or not? And only the future will tell us this. But I don't think that Laurent Fabius will replace John Kerry in the current negotiations.
Charles Meyer?
Well, I think that in politics, friendship is a non-value. What is important is the interest. And concerning what happens in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, I think that the whole discussion about settlement, construction in the settlement, this is not the relevant question. Why not? First of all, I don't see why, even if the next border will be in the middle and the Israeli construction would be on the Palestinian side, why would it be forbidden to Jews, to Israeli, to build and to live in the Palestinian part of the country? If the Palestinian Authority fights against construction, by the way, it means construction of housing, of schools, and not at all, even not industry. And if they don't want any Jew to leave, excuse me, just 1 second, it's merely discrimination, and it's unbearable.
But the reality is, in order to have peace negotiations, Israel needs to halt construction of settlement building
Why?
in the disputed territory, because it is part of the peace process, is one of the conditions.
No, conditions, you can put any condition. Would it be acceptable for you if somebody says, if you are Jewish, you may now construct a building in Neuilly-sur-Seine?
Right, but for the United States, the European Union, most of the international community, it's seen as the confiscation of land in practice.
But the public opinion is not a source of a legal opinion. And from a legal point of view, construction in the territories which are under Israeli administration are not occupied territories.
So can I just turn it around the other way? So if that's the case, would you dispute it if a Palestinian wanted to build somewhere within the borders of Israel, 1967 borders? Would you
They
have
do.
Israeli Arabs do, Israeli Arab citizens, but not, I mean, Palestinians have dreadful problems in East Jerusalem and in any area which is disputed with the local authorities. I mean, it is part and parcel of an ongoing peace process in terms of, as far as the international community see it, the way for this process to move forward is for Israel to halt construction of its settlements in the West Bank. And we even saw the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rescind plans the other day because of the extraordinary concern and outrage that was expressed.
Well,
Which brings us to the back to the issue of François Hollande. He said to halt settlements, but he didn't use the word illegal, as has been done by the European Union. Rouzbeh Parsi, what is your sense of how the French president is handling all of this?
Well, if you would allow me just to go back to the previous discussion for a
Just
moment.
1 second. Rouzbeh Parsi, go ahead.
Yes. This is not a question of public opinion. International law and the Geneva Convention does not allow you to develop or use resources on occupied land. And in this case, what we're discussing is occupied land, which by definition also means that the settlements are illegal. Now, you can discuss whether politically it could be useful to allow some of them to remain through a negotiated process, but it's not a question of public opinion. This is a question of the law.
Should François Hollande have gone further?
I think it would have been very good if he had, because he would have stuck to the line that the European Union has, which is to follow what is the legal conditions. And the legal conditions are that this is an illegal settlement.
So in any case, this is just obviously one issue that will pass. But overall, when you look at the relations between France and Israel, and this is something that you've looked at, Samuel, over the last few years, is this president any different from his predecessors?
Well, it's different because he's very warm towards the state of Israel. I mean, he's spending a bit more than 2 days in the region, which is a lot. I mean, he has spent 2 days when he went to China, so you could see how important it is for him to spend some time in Israel. But if we look at the big picture, at the end today, it is still the United States of America who are providing $3 billion a year to the state of Israel. It is them who are protecting Israel at the United Nations Security Council. It's not France. So we will see in the coming weeks and in the coming months if this is really a shift. And you have shown what Hollande said when he arrived yesterday in Tel Aviv, when he said in Hebrew, "I will always be a friend of Israel." What does that mean? If there is in the future, for example, an Israeli military strike against Iran, what does it mean to be a friend of Israel? To support the strike, to condemn the strike, to help them militarily? We don't know. So what is going to happen with those words in the coming weeks and in the coming months? But what is interesting, as you have said, is also the fact that Hollande is not making any reference to the decision taken by the European Union during the summer in relation to the settlements.
I don't think it's that much different in terms of what Hollande was saying versus what President Sarkozy was saying. And I think really what we've seen in recent years is a defined shift, haven't we? By contrast to, say, when President Chirac was in power, and there was no doubt the relationship between those two countries were very, very strained at the time, to the point that Ariel Sharon, 8 or 9 years ago, actually went ahead and was telling French Jews that the time had come to make Aliyah, to move to Israel, because anti-Semitism had become such a problem, and also because he felt that the government was so unfriendly.
Well, I think that one aspect is that both, if you look at Jacques Chirac and today at François Hollande, we are a lot into emotions. I mean, Jacques Chirac believed that by showing his support to the Palestinians, and he was the only Western leader in the world, I believe, who confronted the Israeli authorities on the ground in Jerusalem, but it did not give him any influence on Yasser Arafat after the failure of the Camp David summit in 2000. What I see is French leaders believing that they can still have an influence on their own, and they do not rely at all at what is decided and what is being done by the European Union. I think it is strange that François Hollande is not making any reference to the guidelines of the EU.
Daniel Ben-Simon, let me ask you on this. Do you think that France is basically boxing above its weight category when it tries to have an influence, as François Hollande said, when it offers its services as mediator?
I'm not sure. You know, President Hollande mentioned it tonight, the Knesset. There are 120,000 French citizens who became Israelis. And they live in Israel, they are part of the Israeli society, they speak French, and there are 600,000 Israelis who are Francophone, who speak French, like myself. And this almost 10% of the Jewish population. It's something very significant, and it can have an impact on Israeli politics. Tonight he spoke on behalf of this 120,000 and on the French-speaking Israelis, and it reminded me, like, you know, King of Morocco, who always saw the Israeli Moroccans as its own people, as part of the Moroccan people. So in a way, François Hollande made a step ahead today by saying, I have my own people here, and they feel at home, I feel at home, they feel at home in France. In a way, he pushed himself forward to become part maybe of the Israeli diplomacy, which France has been absent for so many years. And maybe he gave a hint to the Israelis, I am ready. And he said it tonight in his beautiful speech, I am ready to use all my ability to help you deal with the Arabs. I'm a friend of the Arabs, but I'm your friend too. So use me, please. He said it, and he was applauded by the Knesset members. So in a way, he's trying in a very unconventional way to present himself as a mediator. Maybe if things with the Americans don't go well, he's saying, I am here to help you. As the gentleman mentioned with Sarkozy, it didn't help, really. He was trying, but with Hollande, I must say, there is a warmth toward this guy. I don't know why, despite the fact that he's so unpopular in his home, but here he was received like a king. And maybe his message, please take me to account. I use my ability, use my friendship with the Arabs, with Abu Mazen. I am ready here to help. Maybe it's telling the Israelis the French are here maybe to do more than they did before.
Daniel, didn't we hear the same words, though, from Nicolas Sarkozy a couple of years back, that, you know, I am your friend and I am the one who can act as a go-between? I think the difference this time around, and I imagine you'd agree with me, is Iran. That's what's changed this particular visit.
Exactly. But that's absolutely. It's a week, 2 weeks after Iran, and I tell you, he won the hearts of the Israelis. I mean, left or right, whatever. The fact that he did what he did, and nobody expected him to do what he did, made him a champion in the eyes of the Israelis. And of course, the hero's welcome he got in Israel was due to his Iranian position. He did what he did. And he won the heart of Netanyahu, which is mission impossible. To win, to have Netanyahu kiss you whenever you meet him, so that was the same attitude of the Israelis.
That was on the heels of what happened last week. Of course, there's what's happening this week when those talks resume. We'll pick up on that when we come back in the France 24 debate.